Welcome back to City Summit. Want to jump into the things that matter about being an entrepreneur and the things we normally can't afford and the things we overlook, which is the legal aspect. So we namely wanted to name this session, again, we're not going by the politically correct names that you saw on the website. This is protect yourself before you wreck yourself. So we're gonna have a soundtrack for you guys too. So all these titles match up to a soundtrack. So you'll be able to get the soundtrack on SoundCloud. So you'll be able to listen to us and you'll be like, oh, I remember when they was talking about this. Like Derek said, we can replay the feelings of this whole show, this whole emotion and everything we went through with CITEE through music. So that's why we wanted to relate it to music. See how it all comes together? Like, we got a lot of philosophical marketing people on our team, so we see stuff in a whole different way. If you would have saw this discussion, how we were all excited, like, oh yeah, we can use this song. It just went totally left, and then it was the end of the meeting. But I want to say I have an honor because, first of all, these two people made a very big impact on my life, and I'm going to quickly explain how. And as today, we're not worried about the ESQs at the end of their names. We're more so worried about the professor level. So Professor Gittin actually introduced himself to me, made some introductions, and I don't know if you guys are anywhere close to the cultural scene and hanging out in the so much flashy place that's now known as the Design District. You guys may remember the real Design District when there was a place where you could actually afford to buy a bottle of water. And there's this cool little hip spot called the Stage. You guys remember that? Yeah. So I found out this cool old white dude, as I called him straight up, I was like, you own the Stage? So Howard was a partner in the Stage, and he started making introductions to me, and he got me at a higher level in understanding the tech scene. And I'm thankful for having him here today. But the bigger thing is, and the reason why I wanted to make sure I introduced him equally, is because if any of you know, we started off with Medium 4 was our main company with myself and Dante, and Professor Hill, as we'll call him today, was actually one of our first and largest contracts with a major law firm when we located down here to South Florida, and we were partnered with him from Circle of One Marketing, and he gave us the opportunity to rebrand and build his website. So after we rebranded and built his website, he had learned about the things we were doing, and he became my counsel. And the one person I can call when I'm, hey, Marlon, I'm advising somebody, I'm giving away free advice, I need a percentage if I'm going to raise money for him. 24 to 48 hours, he'll have a contract in place and written up for me. So some of the legal stuff, if you notice, I didn't say too much about when you should have and when you shouldn't have a lawyer. Me personally, work for one, learn how to barter out and keep one in your pocket, because things always go down and you don't want to be the one having that argument. So that's why I wanted to make sure we had this session today. So without further ado, they're lawyers, so you know this is about to be a full slot presentation, so I'm sitting down to take notes with you guys. I'm going to pass it over to the professors for today.
Thank you very much, Michael. Welcome to everyone again for being here at the university, Alpha University, and for spending your day with us. You've been learning all morning about turning your dream into a business, and building a team, and the different things about your foundation, and doing your homework and all of that stuff. We are going to take a little deeper dive into some of the nuances of making sure that you protect that dream. So Professor Gittin and myself, just to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the corporate foundation and some of the nuances of building the foundation of structuring your company and access to funding. Even though I have some background as well in IP, Professor Gittin is going to really take the mantle to kind of talk a little bit about how we're going to protect your ideas, how to protect some of your trade secrets, etc., and some of those things that are important to the intellectual assets of your company. But before I jump into the session, in the spirit of giving, for those of you who gave to Give Miami Day, that we raised over $7.1 million from Miami yesterday for over 600 nonprofits. We set a record, and as history, Sarasota raised $6 million, Howard, and we were not about to go down with that type of philanthropy swag for Give Miami Day. So the Miami Book Fair is this weekend. Street Festival starts this weekend, Michael, and there's several great sessions for entrepreneurs and all the people that are looking to improve their lives from the authors. So I have some discounted Street Festival. Instead of $8, it will cost you $5.
Awesome.
So you can pass those around for me for the book fair. There's a great session tomorrow called The Pathways to Success with Miko Branch. She and her sister started a company for natural curly hair women. You definitely want to see that session tomorrow. So with that, I want to just jump right in, Howard, in regards to your corporations and getting set up. Let me just say this, that all of you are innovators, creators of different types of ideas. Is the reason why you're here for your continuing innovation, technology, entrepreneurship education, right? It's very important that this whole process of learning, even as attorneys, this is my 20th year practicing, and Howard is probably his first year practicing, so he's the young one of the group. We're always learning. We always are trying to figure out different ways that we practice law. And you should treat your entrepreneurship journey in the same way. You know, you're always trying to adjust to what society is doing and the dynamics of society. And one of the most important things that you can do as an entrepreneur, if you learn anything this weekend, is to make sure that you are continuously voracious for information and knowledge. Because this will be very important with the persons that you come across, your partners, whether they're family or not. And there's just so much information out there in the public space that you really have no excuse. But that does not preclude the fact that you should, in your budget, when you meet with your financial advisor and your accountant, that you put in a line item for a relationship with an attorney. It is absolutely critical. And the kind of conversation that you should be having is, what is your budget? What are your needs, right? Because it costs more to correct issues than to be preventative, right? It's almost like Obamacare, right? You got to put in some time to budget.
Hold on 1 second, guys. We're making a quick pause in production real quick because of your lapel.
Is that good?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get it away from your shirt because it's rubbing. It's rubbing. Folks that Thank you.
No problem. I can appreciate that. You know, when you're on TV and you're being recorded, you got the sound man always wants to get his information correct. So I want to talk a little bit about when you start with an idea, and you know that you're going to start this company. One of the most important things is pick an idea that people want and need, and give people a better price for it. Figure that out. Whatever it is, you're in the arts, you're in technology, you're selling products, find out what the market needs or wants and give them a great price for it. And Howard is going to talk to you a little bit about how to protect that idea. But when you get together with friends, family members, you're going to try and decide exactly what it is that you're going to do with this company. You're what we call in the startup world, entrepreneurial world, you're founders of your company. It's very important that you have a very clear conversation, openly, your brother, your friend from college, your friend, your neighbor, about what is going to be your relationship with each other, your percentage in the company, what roles you're going to play in the company. And this has to be articulated in some form of an agreement, right? Typically, for most new startup companies, right, you have to make a decision, are you going to incorporate? And you see out there in the public space, you can either form a corporation or an LLC, generally, are the main types of corporate entities that you can form. It's also very important that you get a good friend who's an accountant very quickly. so you can understand what the tax issues are related to these companies and what's going on in your life. Because typically most small businesses are S corporations, which means that you're a small business. I used to be a small, own my own law firm, and where S corporation basically means that you get taxed based on your personal tax rate. But if you're starting a company that's about to go global, you can't be an S corporation, right? Because you may need more than 100 shareholders, right? So C Corp is probably the better way to go, because the primary difference between a corporation and an LLC is a corporation is owned by shareholders and a limited liability company is owned by members, right? But there are different tax issues associated with each. Most companies that are entrepreneurs and you're going to go global or look for access to funding, most people who want you to be, who are going to invest in your company prefer for you to be a C Corp. And a C Corp basically means that you get taxed twice. Taxed at the corporate level, and you get taxed when you issue dividends. And when you form a C Corp, you have to have some form of a shareholders agreement with your friend as to what the relationship is going to be, the roles, when can you make decisions on expenses, or are you making decisions based on unanimous consent, or is it majority consent? That's going to be in a shareholders agreement. So the agreement between those in a shareholder, in a C Corp, is a shareholders agreement. If you start an LLC, it's what you call an operating agreement, right? But for the most part, and we can get into some very specific questions, is that most venture capital folks who may invest in your company, or even family members that may invest in your company, prefer to have for it to be a C corporation. I don't want to talk today about sole proprietorship and partnerships and all of that, because for the most part, as entrepreneurs, the two types of corporate entities that you're going to create is either a corporation or an LLC. And the likelihood of you being a C Corp, you can choose to be an S Corp, because you don't want to get any bigger than 100 shareholders. You can choose to be an S Corp, and there's certain tax benefits that come with that. Many small businesses and entrepreneurs, the majority of America, are S Corps. One of the things that that you really have to pay very close attention to in the shareholders agreement, just to make sure that you outline the types of shares that you're going to have. There are two types of shares. You have common stock and preferred stock when you have a corporation. That allows you to have different rights that go to the different types of shareholders as well. And later on, we can go into some very specifics with regards to venture capital funding for your corporations as well. With that, I'm going to come back after Howard talks a little bit about the intellectual property. I'm going to come back and talk to you a little bit about term sheets and the types of funding that you can go after, and what that looks like when you are asking for monies. Organizations like this, Howard, we're always making pitches to folks. Folks are trying to find funding, and we want to talk about some of the options that you have when you want to give up some control, because no one gives you money without for something, right? So.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, first of all, I feel extremely underdressed. But, so you're all entrepreneurs. And as Professor Hall was talking, somewhere in your head, you think you have the better mousetrap. You think you have something that the world wants and needs, and you can provide it. Well, if what you have isn't different in some way, then basically you're selling a commodity and you get into a price war. But if what you have is a little bit different, there are ways to build walls around it so that other people can't copy what you're doing. And that's intellectual property. And Professor Hall and I, we didn't do a slideshow.
Professor Hill.
We wanted you to look at us.
We exchanged about.
But I did bring a prop. Everything I know about intellectual property is in this can. Okay? There are basically 4 tools for protecting what you have. Trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, patents. They're not mutually exclusive at times. Sometimes they are. They all have different things they protect. They all last for different time periods. But Coke uses every single one of them to protect this can and what's in it. So let's talk about some of the easy ones. A trademark. A trademark protects your brand, and that has real value. If all you have is a great service and you're a first mover, branding is great. I don't know about you, but my wife would much rather get a Prada handbag than Martha Stewart, but they're probably both made in the same factory in China. But that's what a brand does for you. A brand tells you this is the source. A brand tells you it has a certain quality. And if we all closed our eyes and I said McDonald's, we all get the same vision in our head. That's what branding does. Branding is protected by trademark, and there are 2 types of trademark. There are common law trademarks, which that's the TM you see next to words sometimes. That you get just by using your brand. Just go and use it. And over time, you get rights, and that trademark gets stronger and stronger the more you use it. If you want to have stronger rights at the beginning, you can get the government to give you the stamp of approval on your trademark. And that's the R in the circle. Now, there are certain words that are not trademarkable. There's a sliding scale of words. There's generic, descriptive, suggestive, and fanciful. If I am a farmer of red shiny fruit up in Ocala, and I want to call my red shiny fruit apple, the government's not going to let me do it, because what's everyone else going to call their red shiny fruit? If I'm Publix and I have their bakery and I want to make cookies and cakes that taste like the red shiny fruit, whether they have the red shiny fruit in it or not, and I want to call it apple cookies and apple cakes, the government won't let you register that either, because what's everyone else going to call their cookies and cakes? But now let's say you're a perfume manufacturer and you have a sweet smelling perfume that you put into a bottle that even looks like the red shiny fruit, and you call it apple perfume. Well, now that's more suggestive of the qualities of the perfume. That you probably can get away with. Now you're a computer company and you call yourself Apple. Well, that's a damn strong mark. And the more fanciful you are, everybody, your first inclination is, I want to tell the world what I'm doing. So your trademark often just describes what you're doing. But if you think about some of the strongest marks in the world, they're fanciful. Uber, Google, Amazon. Nothing to do with the product, but they're the strongest marks in the world. And what that does is keeps other people from selling your service under a similar sounding name, so that you can't confuse the public. So all that protects is your brand, your goodwill. Now, copyright protects the expression. There's a copyright on this can for the artwork. Copyright protects artistic creations, sounds like music, visual, moving, still, photos, movies. It even protects computer code. So my first bit of free advice, actually I just gave you the free advice, slap a TM on your brand even before you register it. Copyright, the United States is the only country in the world that makes you register your copyright. So you get worldwide rights when you go public with whatever you've created, just by putting a C in a circle, the name of your company, and the year it first went public. So anything artistic. It could be your advertising materials, your website, all of that, the code behind the website, all copyrightable. Now, a copyright is what it sounds like. It prevents people from copying what you have. It doesn't prevent people from creating it on their own. So if you have a beautiful photograph of the moon setting and you put a copyright on it, nobody can use your photograph in advertisement, on their own website, anyway, because you created that. But nothing can stop them from going out there the next day and making their own photograph of the same thing. It doesn't protect the idea, it just protects that artist's expression of that idea. Now, trade secret. So, what's trade secret? Well, a trade secret can protect anything that the fact that you know about it and no one else does gives you value. It could be a formula. It could be the way you handle customers. It could be, again, the computer code, the source code behind what you do to produce the service that you do. It can be any of those things. Again, a trade secret, you protect it, it's free, it costs you nothing. But it's very hard and very time intensive to protect it. The trade secret in the can of Coke is Coke's formula. They print it 1 million times a day. They even print it by relative, I think it's volume, not weight, of each ingredient in order, in descending order. But, I mean, Professor Hill and I are old enough to remember the Coke versus Pepsi blind taste test ads, because they could swear that you could taste the difference, and of course Coke and Pepsi each insisted theirs was better. That's the power of that trade secret. In fact, there used to be an urban myth that only 7 people knew the full recipe and they were not allowed to be on the same airplane at once. But the way you protect a trade secret is with non-disclosure agreements, which we're going to talk about later. Limit access. As a young engineer, I worked for the Army before computers. And I remember they would have drawers and they would put a big confidential sticker, not sticker, but like a cardboard stick out if that drawer was open and you weren't supposed to be around it. So you segregate your confidential information from your public information. You can limit access, even within your own company. Your sales clerk doesn't need to know what your financials are. They don't need to know if you have a product, how you make it, or where you make it. You limit the access. For some people, a competitive advantage may be that I found the world's greatest jewelry maker in Thailand, and the terms with them are better than they are in China. I actually have a client where that turned out what the case was. That's his trade secret. And when he sells to people like QVC and they ask who's your source, he doesn't tell them. Luckily enough, he's been on with multi-million-dollar products before, so they don't push it too hard. But if you're first time out, you can't get that kind of reaction, so that's where you say, okay, I'll tell you, but you've got to sign my confidentiality agreement. The fourth, and the granddaddy of them all, is the patent. The patent costs money. But the patent gives you a monopoly for 20 years on whatever it is you're doing. So a patent protects any new, useful, non-obvious idea. And it can be a chemical formula. It can, well, not so much anymore, but there was a time when it could be a method of doing business. If you frame it correctly, it still can be. absolutely physical structures. So in this can, if Coke made a decision, they weren't going to patent their formula. They're going to keep it a trade secret, and that helped build the mystique around the company. But there are patents on the top, how they can it, the entire machinery that cans Coca-Cola or bottles it. That type of thing is patented. And the way the patent process works is every patent's got 3 basic parts. The BS in the front. Here's what's wrong with the world. The trade-off with the patent and why it doesn't work with a trade secret is the government says, I'm going to give you a monopoly, but you have to teach the world what you're doing. You then have to describe your idea well enough that somebody else can read it and go, aha, that's what you do. And that usually entails detailed drawings or flow charts and a reference to every piece in the drawings. And the last part is the claims. I claim this as my invention. So you file that with the government, and whereas a copyright's a rubber stamp, a trademark is fairly simple to figure out your likelihood of success, and Professor Hill and I will talk about that later. It's the patent office has literally buildings full of examiners whose job it is to make sure that what you're doing is new and not obvious. So if you're a car manufacturer and I'm the first person to make a green Lamborghini, well, we've had Lamborghinis, we've had green paint. It's new, but it's not very inventive. But if I'm the first person to put a half a sphere on top of that little cylinder where the pistons fire, that's the Hemi. The Beach Boys wrote songs about it. Dodge still puts it on their truck 60 years later. That was invention. And that's it. Those are the 4 ways you can protect. They're not mutually exclusive. You can brand and copyright things and patent them. The 2 that really don't jive are trademark and patent. But I will tell you right now, until you make the decision to patent, keep everything a trade secret. Mm-hmm. So when you go to those cocktail parties that Professor Hill was talking about and you talk to founders, don't tell them more than they need to know. Because they may say, hey, that's a great idea, but my brother Marvin can do it better.
Yeah. Well, you know, in this pathway of this continuing education and this pursuit for knowledge, as lawyers, we have gone to school to study the law. It's not our law. This law was created by certain legislatures, federal and state government. It's very important that you pay very close attention as to who is helping to make those laws. Corporate law, intellectual property law, bankruptcy, family law. These things don't just come out of the universe. Someone has to sit down and figure out, okay, why is it that we're going to create a law that says to protect a patent, you can only get protection for 20 years? Who said that? Why 20 years? Who came up with that? Why is it you can reorganize your debt as a corporation, but you can't reorganize your student debt? So towards the end, I want to come back a little bit to talk a little bit about government and the impact of that, and why it is very important for you as entrepreneurs to follow what the law is. In addition to setting up your corporation and having the right structuring and having an understanding with your partners and your founders as to what your relationship and roles is, some of the contracts that you need to have in place is that your company, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, you need to have a standard form contract that you're using to provide the services that you are going to be selling to the public, a product or a service. This standard form contract is available, different forms. You need to do some research with regards to what works in your industry. But if you're going to provide a service or a product to the public, you need to have some sort of contract that you are going to present to your clients and your customers. And that contract needs to be as tight and beneficial to you, the person that you are going to be providing a service or a product to, they will they will have their own lawyers and give you input as to what you're going to do there. You are going to enter into relationships with persons who are either going to be hired by you full-time or independent contractors. You need to have something in writing. If you have spent so much time with your innovation and your unique things that you're coming up with, right? And you're going to share these documents with persons, third parties, including family, including some of these trademarks and copyrights or patent ideas in technology. You need to have something in writing with these persons, especially with independent contractors. Work for hire. If someone designs something for you, a logo, or designs a source code, you need to make sure that you own the rights to that creativity. They're being paid for their services. Thank you very much. Please deliver the service as we have understood. You need to make sure that you have those independent contractor agreements in place. Hiring employees. We won't spend that much time, Professor, getting about labor and employment law. There are a whole set of laws there as well with regards to your employees. But with the corporate structuring, sometimes you may even offer what's called stock options as an incentive instead of paying compensation directly. You have stock options which rewards people for their contributions to help build the company. It's a great way to reward employees or even contractors or advisors with stock options as well. Those can get a little bit tricky in regards to just making sure how that is that stock option plan, but it's a great way to compensate persons who have contributed to your company. As I said, please solicit yourself a great accountant or tax lawyer to look at the tax structures of how you're structuring your company. It will pay off in the long run. Just invest the money in that so that they can help you understand some of the projections as it relates to your finances. That's where most entrepreneurs that I've come in contact with really go off on the exit, right? How much more time do we have, Professor Dean Hall? How much more time?
3 minutes, I was going to open up Q&A and I have a question.
Okay,
And
all right.
if I could just add one thing to that as a follow-up to an earlier conversation from the last talk about how do you approach money or how do you approach other professionals. And it is very hard, as Dr. Gibson said, to approach people who aren't like you. Using your lawyers and your accountants as a stamp of approval to make introductions. So that, as Professor Hill was saying, it's a very important relationship, not just to make sure you have the right advisors around you, but if you can choose amongst lawyers and accountants and bankers, try to find one that you can work with who you think will step up for you when the time comes.
Yeah. And you start the company and you open your bank account and you never ask who the manager of the bank is. Why are you going to open your account for your company and your great innovative idea and not have a relationship with your financial institution, right? So they need to be on your speed dial, your banker, your accountant, your attorney, and then you have family members. These are your circle of persons that need to be on your speed dial to provide you support, because typically in starting your company, you don't have a full network of people to help be on your, but these are potential people that are either advisors or part of your board. Let me just close real quickly, Dean Hall, in regards to just talking about the money. You form this company, it's a C Corp. You take out a little bit of money out of your 401k. You call your uncle Bobby and your aunt and ask them to borrow some money, and you get through the first phase of the development of the company, and then you look at your business plan, which I hope that you have developed, and you say, okay, what's next? Okay, you can either borrow the money, it's a regular small business loan, or you can have a relationship with someone who says, well, I'll lend you the money if you give me a percentage in your company. And you can have what's called a convertible note. They lend you the money, but it can be converted into equity. The money either comes from the founders or the co-founders, angel investors or friends, and then you have venture capital firms that are looking out for great ideas. There are companies out there surveying the entire marketplace, looking for the next innovator, that could be right here in this room as to who is coming up with the next idea that people need and want. Okay, the society is fluid all the time. There are different things happening. Different things have to be created. You wake up in the middle of the night, and the reason what makes this country so great is that we're innovating all the time.
Yes, yes. All right, one more story. Something you said, venture capitalists, caught my attention, because that's a world that the two of us spend a lot of time in. For the first year or so, you will never see a venture capitalist because you're just too young. I shouldn't be here right now. I should be on my beach on my Caribbean island. I threw away a partnership on Wall Street to help run a venture-backed startup down in Miami. In fact, when they recruited me, they said, I said, what's the catch? They go, well, right now our headquarters are in Miami. I said, what's the catch? Because I was up in New York getting on the train in the snow every morning at 6, and I was getting a limo ride at home every night at 12:30 to go dig my car out of the snow at the train station to start over again. I was employee number 16. We built the company to 140 people. I bought a factory in Michigan. We raised $140 million. I wrote the private placement memorandum, which is the step kind of before you go public. I had the jet revved up to take me to that private dinner at Burns 3 weeks before 9/11. I even had deals where Motorola and Nortel and Lucent were all beta testing my product and loving it. I had a deal with MIT, right of first refusal on anything they did in my technology. So MIT was part of my research arm. Well, after 9/11, Motorola went bankrupt, Nortel went bankrupt, Lucent got bought, no one wanted my product. So I took the company into bankruptcy. I raised $10 million more. But there was, in fact, Solomon Smith Barney was my investment bank. After 9/11, everybody went up the risk curve. Investment bankers became banks, venture capitalists became investment bankers, angel investors became venture capital. In fact, I'm on the shadow cabinet of a few angel groups down here. And the first question is, they don't want to see profit, they want to see revenue stream. Unless you have a medical device, then they may give you a chance. Friends and family, as Professor Hill was saying, and your credit cards have become seed investors. So you've got to be ready for that. You really do. It gets, but it doesn't mean you don't go talk to these people, because many venture capitalists will follow a company for a year and a half before investing. So I'm not saying don't make those relationships. The other lesson I learned was always have a plan B. We had no plan Bs. So when Motorola and Lucent and Nortel said we don't want your product, I gave the keys to the bank for my company. But it's just something to keep in mind. All entrepreneurs are, and you go to, venture capital, like this, like that. You've got to have some story behind you, some success, before you get the attention of venture capitalists.
Yeah. And with that success, I'll close with this thought, is that never undervalue the idea that you have.
True.
Never undervalue it. You are the creator of it. You never know where it's going to go. But what I'd like to say to you is that you need to put together a very simple legal inventory plan as to what you're going to do to bring this idea to life. Our job as lawyers is to help you to take that idea into a revenue stream that makes a profit sustainably for generations to come. And if we can successfully do that as lawyers, then we've done our job. But that's the cycle. Idea to profit, sustained for the next generation to have it, right? Trademark can be renewed. Copyright lasts for the entire life of the creator, and then 70 years after before it becomes public domain, and then the patent has its lifeline as well before everyone has access to the new and obvious idea. But whether it's for profit or nonprofit, Dean Hall, you can make money as a nonprofit. Let me say that again. Remix. You can make money as a nonprofit organization. Right? There are social entrepreneurs, if that's your business model. And you can have a nonprofit that has a relationship with a for-profit if it's arm's length as well. Some people don't look at that business model as well. So there are different ways that you can create a structure that allows you to give what people need and want at the best value.
Thank you very much. We're going to open up for Q&As if you guys have any questions. Toya's in the back, she'll come to you. But I have one question that has always been asked to me, has been addressed. I personally don't sign them anymore because I'm just like, if you don't have a patent, I probably heard the idea before, so I don't really do non-disclosure. But what would you define as the perfect mutual non-disclosure agreement?
The one-sided one? Non-disclosures have become almost template-ish. You probably can go to LegalZoom and find a decent one. What you want to make sure is that everything that you disclose is protected, with the exception of three, which are three fair exceptions. Well, four. One is it's publicly known. I read it, once you launch your product, if I can reverse engineer it, trade secrets don't work anymore, NDAs don't work anymore. Why should I have to keep it a secret when the rest of the world does? Two is you heard it, although it's not widespread, you heard it from someone else who wasn't under an NDA, because then it's really public information. Number three is I created it myself without your help. It's the white room experience, which is also the way you get around a copyright, is you send someone else with no exposure to go create the idea. But there you might want to add a clause like something very legalese, as proven by contemporaneous documentation, which means show me the writing. And the fourth is that if a court asks me to disclose it, but then there's usually clauses that say, yes, but only after you tell me and I get a chance to fight it. And if I lose, you only tell them as much as the court asks for. It doesn't open the tap. And that's your basic fair, protects you NDA.
Yeah. In addition to that, like Professor Gittin said, when you come up with your brand, or you write something, or you design something, or you're journaling something, protect it. File for the trademark. Filing fees $375, federal trademark, $85 to trademark it with the state. Copyright application, Howard, is $85.
$275 if you do it by federal.
The copyright application, $85.
$85
for the copyright. Very easy, right? So you can copyright something that you sketch, you can copyright something, a voice memo, you can copyright something that you paint. It's very simple.
And two other tricks that aren't really tricks, they're pretty much common knowledge to most people. When you deposit something to be copyrighted, it becomes public. So if part of what you're depositing is your trade secret, like your source code, you can deposit it by only depositing, they've upped it. It used to be the first 10 and last 10 pages. Now it's the first 25 and last 25. Well, back in the Stone Age when I was programming computers, and if you dropped your cards, you were in trouble. That really meant something because your program was linear. Now that it's modular, you can pick any 10 or 25 pages you want. So I would start with the opening screens and end with the log-offs. And you don't give away the secrets, but you can still claim copyright protection.
Mm-hmm.
And that you should do as quickly as possible.
That's big.
And again, it's free to put the C in the circle on it. It's free to slap a TM.
And even as simple, Howard, as the creativity of your website. Copyright the pages of your website.
Absolutely.
You know, you design, you spend all this money hiring a webmaster and designing your website, and then you're scrolling on the internet and you go to this other site and then you see your content or your photos. That's a no-no. It's unacceptable, right? Because you are innovating and you're trying to create a platform. Another thing is for your brand, buy all the domain names. .tv, .biz, .net, .co, buy everything related to your brand. And GoDaddy and Register.com offers you a package price.
And in order to pick a trademark, remember, it's if you're confusingly similar to somebody else, you're asking for trouble. When you pick a trademark, there are a couple of easy things to do. One, go to uspto.gov, and there's a section called, there's the patent side, tests. Go to tests and plug in your name that you're thinking about and see what shows up.
You'd be surprised.
Yes, you will be surprised at what shows up. And as long as they're not in the same industry as you are, unless you want to do Nike with your name next to it, if they're not in the same industry as you are, that's usually a good first cut. Then do an SEO search on your own. Google it, Yahoo it, and see if anyone else, because not everyone registers their trademark. They rely on the TM. I'm always shocked how many TMs there are out there.
Yeah.
The New York Mets logo is a TM. So I'm always shocked. So do those two things. And then also at the same time, as Professor Hill said, see the availability of the domain, because that drives commerce these days. Forget about protecting it. That's how people are going to get to your doorstep.
So I had,
Including your name, by the way.
Yes, the name.
MichaelHall.com, ChristopherBenjamin.com, .net. Even for your kids, if you have a talented kid, get their domain name immediately.
one of the questions were, if we can, you got a question?
Yeah.
Okay, we got one more, and so you will go here and we'll close out this thing, yeah. Briefly, if you had to separate these things with one sentence, the difference between convertible note, equity, shares, and stock options. How would you allow somebody to understand, because a lot of us are startups here, so understanding the difference of bringing on team people or bringing on investors, which ones, convertible notes, equity shares, or actual stock options?
It's all about control. What are you willing to give up, right? You have 100% of the pie. You start or you're a founder, and then now you have to bring in some other folks, but you need them. You need their resources. What part of that 100% are you willing to give up? If we're having Thanksgiving next week and you have the entire sweet potato pie, you know, I'm not giving up.
Are we talking about the Patti LaBelle or my grandma's?
What? We're talking about patties now. But the bottom line is it's about...
Y'all let go. Patti LaBelle, I'll cut off a piece of that. My grandma, I need all 100 of that.
Well, what Professor Hill said is true, and I would say that on top of that, what differentiates the three is timing, and you can put some strings on some of it. If you give outright equity, you're married. You are married, and divorces are painful, and you better go see Professor Hill about the separation agreement.
Yeah.
If you give a convertible note, you're saying we will be married after a certain amount of time, or if certain things happen, and often one of us can force the other to get hitched. There's usually a trigger that if I'm selling for 3 times my value, I can take you out and you'll come along for the ride, or vice versa. At the end of 5 years, it's my choice. You either give me my money back plus interest, or you give me a percentage of the company to be figured out. Options you can put strings on.
Mm-hmm.
If you're still with us in 3 years, you get options.
Don't leave too early.
Yeah.
Because you may not be able to.
Exactly. If we hit certain milestones, you'll get those options. So options can come with strings. Options and convertible notes come with timing. Straight out equity, you're married.
And the control and the timing has to do with your financial plan.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
you need to know
What kind of money you need and
what
what
kind of
kind
money
of
you
car
need.
you
That's a very good point. You don't pay for options until you want to convert. The other two get paid for up front.
Professor Gibbs, my question
Talk
is. Just speaking low. My question is in regards to patents in the United States and enforcing them across other countries. And I know there were some changes to the laws.
That's a very good point. Patents and trademarks are huge moneymakers for every government in the world. So you have to file for your patent in every country that you care about. What you can do is file in the US first for patents, and then you have a year to make up your mind whether you have the money or the interest in filing in other countries. And it's as if you filed in those other countries a year ago. At the end of that year, you shouldn't bother, because then your patent in the US can be used against you in your patents in other countries. Trademarks have a similar rule, but it's 6 months. You can go anywhere in the world. Although, unlike patents, registering in the US and waiting for a while, or even starting to put your toe in the market in other markets like China and Europe, there's not really a European patent yet. They're talking about it. I've been doing this for 30 years. They've been talking about it for 15. But there is a European trademark that you can get to save a little time and money. But if we live in Miami, if you're thinking about South America, they're all on their own systems. You've got to pay to play in all those countries.
So what's your
except
philosophy?
for copyrights.
So, Professor, what's your philosophy on international trademarks? Someone says, is there one place that you can go? Or you have to go to each country that you're going to do business in?
I would say that if you have the budget, if you don't have the budget, pick your biggest market, and that's usually the US. Because remember, branding is my market. Who's going to recognize me for what I am? As opposed to patents, which can prevent Chinese manufacturers from making your product. It can also prevent Chinese manufacturers from importing your product. But in this day and age of drop shipment, it's really hard to enforce that. When I was a young kid lawyer and I was a litigator, which I soon realized I wasn't the biggest jerk in the room, so I gave it up. There was a thing called there still exists, the International Trade Commission, where you would go to the port and get the goods impounded. Things don't come in by port anymore. They come in by FedEx. So my advice is trademark, go to your biggest markets. Patents, go to where your biggest market is first, and then go to where you think it may be manufactured.
Mm-hmm.
Last question.
Oh, I wanted to know what you guys thought about using the crowdfunding platforms to develop new products or open new businesses.
Well, crowdfunding sites, be sure that you read very carefully the terms of use conditions as it relates to the platform. Just because you're using crowdfunding doesn't mean that you're not going to have an agreement with the persons that are giving you the money. So, right, so you're going to be setting up the structure. What are you giving for the resources that the individuals are giving you? Equity, options, product, convertible notes. You can have different types of deals, right? But you can be as creative as possible. One of the things that crowdfunding has done, it has disrupted the funding arena, the financial funding arena, which is good, right? We need innovation there, and we need to think about different ways to get your business up and running. But again, you're giving up something of value for something in return, and if you're willing to be comfortable with what you're giving up, go for it.
My only caveat, and there's difference between crowdsourcing and Kickstarter, where you're giving a promise of a product later, and a lot of people I run across are on Kickstarter. Crowdfunding, you always have to think about who is my next investor. Will my next investor want to invest with 100 people who are unsophisticated and own 10% of my company? So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying buyer, be careful about it. And it's funny. I actually asked that question. One of my partners is one of the founders of New World Angels, and he's a venture capital lawyer at our firm. And I said, I bet you someone's going to ask me that. You didn't quite ask the question, what about the new rules? But he said they would not invest in anyone who had significant investors from a crowdfunding platform.
Better make it, hold on, you remember the rule. All right, we're gonna close out with this.
Let me just say real quickly, remember now.
Hold on, let's give one more question.
Oh, sure,
Go
one
ahead.
more question, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. My question is this. Professor Hill, you mentioned to value your idea. The question becomes is how do you put valuation on your sweat equity when so much valuation is put into investors that put their monetary funds forward, but not much in terms of what your sweat equity was in terms of the work that you put in starting the company.
Yeah.
Before you
et cetera.
answer, Marlon.
How do you deal with that?
Sure.
Before you answer Professor Hill, I'm sorry. I think all of you guys heard, and you weren't, I don't think you were here at that point, but as Professor Arshong said, a lot of people will look, you're gonna have to work no matter what. What they're really gonna look at is how much of your own money have you spent, how much money have you been able to raise on your own. I've learned the hard way as an entrepreneur, nobody cares how hard you work. And I just want you to understand that. You don't get to turn in a timesheet that says I put in 100 hours this week, and they say, okay, well, you're worth $80 an hour. Oh, you did $8,000 worth of services. They don't care, because your job is to get it done. When the rush card failed, Russell Simmons didn't get to say, I've been working on the rush card forever. The only thing they knew, people didn't have their money, the card was failing. He had to be the spokesperson to say, we're doing everything we can. So I found the hard way. Now, I'm wondering if it's gonna be a different answer, but I know it's not gonna be, because I've worked with Marlon. So the only sweat equity I could exchange with Professor Hill is hours for hours. Otherwise, he doesn't care what I'm doing to make medium for work or make digital grass work. He just needs to know that it works. Because if it doesn't work, he's not gonna invest in you. So imagine you put in 10,000, 20,000 hours. Nobody cares if the product still sucks. Nobody cares if the app is just not there. They won't see it that way. They won't give you a dollar value to it.
Yeah, but I think it's not a different answer. But I do think that there is something to be said though in regards to self-worth, right? And who gets to determine in the Department of Labor as to why you're paid $75,000 and I'm paid $50,000, or she's paid $7 an hour, right? Who came up with that structure of value for sweat equity and for work, an honest day's work, right? As entrepreneurs, we don't have the luxury of losing sleep over value. You need to just get it done. You need to, as quickly as you can, to get your plan into place, get it monetized, get your product or service to market, get persons to purchase that product and service with the best value, and to get that revenue stream going and the profit going so that you can determine whether you're going to keep it closely held corporation or you're going to take it public so that more people can have it. That's what you should be working on.
All right, I'm sorry, we gotta wrap it up. We got time restrictions. So I want to give our professors a round of applause. Thank you, Professor Hill and Professor Hill.